welcome back, everyone, to Ramban ala Parsha. I very much hope that you missed learning Ramban with me every week. I know I missed it, and our vacation, so to speak, was longer than it needed to be. I went for a week with our Talmidim to Poland, so I couldn't do it there either. But we're back, and we're back just in time. Of all the Rambans ala Torah that we've done, that we haven't done yet, the Ramban on Kedoshim to you, I think arguably, and maybe not even arguably, everybody would agree, is sort of the most famous. If you know one Ramban ala Torah, you know this Ramban on Kedoshim to you. And I think for a number of reasons we want to explore together today, but the main one is because the Ramban came up with a phrase that made its way into our lexicon of halacha. Naval BeReshut HaTorah, literally a scoundrel with the permission of the Torah, which is sort of a difficult concept to understand. What does it mean with the permission of the Torah? As a kid, I assumed that Naval BeReshut HaTorah was like in a Mishnah someplace, because it's so much a part of how we talk. I just assumed it was, I was shocked to find out that the Ramban made it up. But he made it up, and it became part of how we discuss concepts in halacha and ashkafa. And let's start with the first Ramban ala Torah. We'll try to do 4 Rambans, most of them at the beginning of the Parsha. The Ramban, like other Mefarshim, sees the beginning of Kedoshim as paralleling the Aseret HaDibros. So it's not surprising that you find significant ideas and significant thoughts in the Ramban at the beginning of the Parsha. So the Parsha begins, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem Kedoshim tihiyu, Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Right? Kedoshim to you. So Rashi says Kedoshim means prushim. Prushim min ha'arayot. But the Ramban thinks there's something bigger going on here. He doesn't disagree with Rashi that it includes being parush min ha'arayot, but he thinks it means being parush generally. And what does that mean? So we'll pick up a little bit, not at the very, very beginning of the Ramban, we'll pick in a few lines on. Aval haprishut Hi hamuzkeret b'chol makom b'Talmud. So the Ramban, to be parush, to be parushim min ha'arayot, it's a halachic concept that we know. It comes up many times in the Gemara. What does it mean? Shebe'ala nikru prushim. People are called prushim. It means separate. V'a'inyan ki haTorah hizhira ba'arayot uv'ma'achalim ha'asurim. Right? The Torah tells you, why does it come here? So the Torah tells you in Achremos, all the forbidden relationships. And it tells you all the prohibited things you're not allowed to eat. However, v'hitira habia ish b'ishto. It's not like the Torah asers all sexual relations. It just asers certain relationships. And it doesn't aser va'achilat habasar v'hayayin. That's not aser. Imkain, says the Ramban, and this is sort of the major philosophic point. Is it aser, is it mutter? Says the Ramban, Imkain, Yimtza bal hata'ava makom liyot shatuf bizimat ishto o nashav harabot. Right? If relations are mutter in the Torah, so then a person could find himself having relations all the time with his wife, with his many wives, as was permitted by the Torah originally. V'liyot bisove yayin bezole basar lamo. You can act to extreme. I can eat a lot of meat all the time. I can get drunk all the time. And now the Ramban moves on to something that's not even asur at all. V'daber kirtzono b'chol ha'nevalot. And you can curse. You can speak this. You can speak in a disgusting fashion. Why? Shalo huzkar isur zeh b'Torah. Says the Ramban, where does the Torah say you're not allowed to curse? V'hinei yihiyeh naval BeReshut HaTorah. The result will be that you found loopholes. You found things that are not technically prohibited by the Torah, and so therefore you'll take advantage of it. And says the Ramban, that approach to Torah is Naval BeReshut HaTorah. Technically speaking, getting drunk is not prohibited by the Torah. Technically speaking, having family relations all the time is not prohibited by the Torah, but it's not what the Torah wants. And so if you do that, you're a Naval BeReshut HaTorah. If you say, where does it say that this is asur in the Torah? The Ramban says, I can't tell you where it says it, but I know it. Let's continue. Lefikach ba hakatuv acharei sheperat ha'isurim sha'asar otam legamre. After the Torah and Achremos told us all the forbidden relations, Vitziva bidavar klali shenihiyeh prushim min hamutarot, or min hamotarot. Right? The Ramban tells us, now the Torah tells us to be separate even if it's not something that's prohibited specifically. Yimat b'mishgal kinyan shamru, shelo yihiyu talmidei chachamim mitzuyim eitzel nishotehem kitarnagolim. It's a funny phrase, right? You're not supposed to be like a rooster. Apparently, it has relations all the time. V'lo yishamesh ela kfiat tzarich b'kiyum hamitzvah mimanu. Your relations are limited by the mitzvah. And I just want to make clear, the mitzvah doesn't mean making your, make period verivia. You're allowed to have relations when that's not possible. It means the mitzvah of ona, right? The Torah believes in relations between man and woman. It just needs to be regulated. V'yikadesh atzmo min hayayin b'miyuto, right? You won't have drinking all the time. Kimo shekara katuv hanazir kodesh. Why is it nazir called kodesh? Why is he called separate? Why is he called holy? Because he doesn't drink wine. Wine is asur. V'yizkar haraot hanizkarot mimenu batorah. B'noach belot. He says the Torah has already told us stories about wine, right? After the Mabul, Noach plants a vineyard. Vayesh min hayayin vayishkar vayitgal b'toch alo vayarcham aviknan. That whole terrible story after the Mabul is all as a result of Noach getting drunk. Lot and his daughters, right? Ammon, Moab, they come from the prohibited relations that Lot had when his daughters got him drunk and they had relations with him. And the Ramban is making a bigger point here. He's telling us there are things that if you read the Torah, you know that the Torah doesn't want you to do. Is there a pasuk in the Torah that says don't get drunk? No. But there's a story in the Torah. There's more than one story in the Torah. And a person who gets drunk loses his self-control. Says the Ramban, it's obvious then that that's not what the Torah wants. Does the Torah want you to make Kiddush on Shabbos? Yes. Does the Torah want you to make Kiddush on Yom Tov? Of course. But limitations. Limitations on all things. There's no such thing as something that's so good that you can have an unlimited relationship with it. And this is like a major philosophic point in the Ramban. Technically speaking, it's mutter. But the Torah doesn't want you to do that. V'chein, yafrish, now another example. V'chein, yafrish atzmo min hatuma. Afal pi shelo huzharnu mimenu b'Torah, right? There's no prohibition on a Yisrael becoming tameh, even tumas meis. It's not asur. But you still want to limit it if you can. Kinyan sheizkiru bigdei amaretz midras. Okay, a technical halacha that an amaretz isn't careful in tumantara, so his begadim are mitame to who? Leprushim. To a person who wants to live his life on a higher level. Ukimo shenikra nazir kadosh bishamro mitumat hameit gamkein v'gam yishmor pivu lishano mehitgael b'ribui ha'achila hagasa umin hadibur hanimas. He says to be a nazir, to be a parush, to be separate and holy, is not just avoiding tuma, which again is mutter. It's not cursing. It's speaking in a certain way. It's not eating. It's not being a glutton. Okay? Kinyan shehizkir hakatuv v'chalped dover nevala. It's not what the Torah wants. V'yikadesh atzmo b'zeh ad sheyagia leprishut. You want to become holier until you're a parush kimo shamua Rabbi Chia. Shelo sach sicha b'teila miyamav. Imagine a person who never speaks, not just doesn't speak lashon hara, he doesn't speak non-valuable things. He doesn't just have, common gossipy conversations. Be'elu ukiyotze b'hen ba'a ha-mitzvah hazot ha-klalit acharei shepeirat kol ha'averot shehem asurot legamre. Says the Ramban, the Torah prohibited relations and prohibited machalas asuros and prohibited a whole bunch of things in the beginning of Vayikra. And then the Torah comes in Kedoshim and says, Kedoshim tihiyu. And says the Ramban, that's the point. All of the other specific prohibitions are to let you know the Torah wants you to lead a certain type of life. And the certain type of life that the Torah wants you to lead is the life of a kadosh. To do that, you have to avoid all these little things. But what's revolutionary in the Ramban is he's saying, don't focus on the particular isurim. There's something bigger. There's a goal that the Torah is looking for from us. It's true, to get to that goal, you have to avoid the small things. But the goal is a bigger idea. And he has other examples. And the examples will really, really bring this point home. I'm skipping a few lines now. V'zed derech HaTorah. The Ramban says, I see this in many, many places in the Torah. Lifrot v'lichlol b'kiyotze b'zeh. Right, to give you specific prohibitions. Ki acharei azharot pirtei hadinim b'chol masa u'matan shebein ben adam lo tigno v'lo tigzol v'lo tonu shar ha'azharot. And then the Torah says, Amar bichlal va'asita hayashar v'hatov b'nei Hashem. This is going to be a big Ramban when we get there in Devarim, but it's exactly this point. The Torah is more than the do's and the don'ts. The Torah has a goal for human beings, to live lives of tahara, to live lives of kedusha, to live lives of closeness to God. And when the Torah, after it tells you specific prohibitions, it says, Va'asita hayashar v'hatov. So you say, what's that adding? The answer is it's adding everything that's not specific in the Torah. When somebody says, God forbid, I don't have to pay taxes, where does it say in the Torah that I have to pay taxes? The Ramban would say, what are you talking about? It says Kedoshim tihiyu. It says V'asita hayashar v'hatov. It's not just the specifics. The specifics matter. God forbid, I'm not saying they don't matter. But it's much more than that. And let's continue. Sheyachnis ba'asei, the words V'asita hayashar v'hatov introduce and are included in the asei hayosher v'hahashvaya. Right? Relations with other people, compromise, hashvaya, agreeing on things you don't have to agree to. V'chol lifnim mishurat hadin lirtzon chaverav. Right? If you're having a fight with someone, if you're having a disagreement. So the point is, compromise, even if you don't have to, even if you think you're right. As we'll explain when we get there. Now a bigger example that comes up a lot in conversation. V'chein b'inyan hashabat, asar hamelachot belav, v'hatrachim ba'asei klali shenemar tishbot. Says the Ramban, there are things you can't do on Shabbos. Take an example. One of those things is not carrying your weights from the basement to the attic. But says the Ramban, the Torah doesn't want you to do that. The idea of Shabbos stick, like there are things that are inappropriate to do on Shabbos, that the Ramban says that's the mitzvah saseh of tishbos. I'm not allowed to do malacha. But technically speaking, if I stay in bed all of Shabbos, right, is that a proper Shabbos? Says Ramban, no. There's a tishbos aspect. There's a positive that we want. Va'od afaresh zeh bezrat Hashem will also explain that. V'tam ha'katuv shamar ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. Very last point, says the Ramban. It's a little vague. What does it mean, be kadosh, because I'm kadosh? Lomar she'anachnu nizke lidavka bo bihiyotenu kedoshim. Says the Ramban, lihidamot b'darchei Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying there's a bigger point here, not just the do's and the don'ts. If you want to be kadosh, and if you want to be close to me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm kadosh. If you want to be close to me, you have to be kadoshim also. There's a much bigger point here. There's a much bigger goal here. V'hinei zeh kinyan hadibur harishon ba'aseret hadibrot. How is this like the dibur harishon ba'aseret hadibrot? So the answer is, there's a major machlokas what the first dibur is, right? We go to shul, we see Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim beit avadim. But you could just see that as an introduction. But the Ramban says no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's being, who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, requires certain things. And it's very parallel to Kedoshim tihiyu. What's the specific points of Kedoshim tihiyu? I don't know, it's a hard question, the specifics. But the general idea is the exact same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kadosh. The more we want to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more we need to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So again, this idea that repeats many times in the Ramban, it's almost a philosophy of his, is that yes, there are specific Yisurim, and yes, there are specific mitzvos, but above and beyond all that are the values of the Torah, the values of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you want to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you need to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's by being Kedoshim Tihiyu. Okay, that's the first and the most famous Ramban on this week's parsha. But let's continue. Pasuk Yudalid. Really one of the most difficult psukim in the Torah. Lo tikalel cheresh, v'lifnei iver lo titein michshol, v'yareita me'elokecha ani Hashem. Okay, so obviously you could translate lo tikalel cheresh. Okay, you can't curse a deaf person. V'lifnei iver lo titein michshol. You can't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. But Chazal, and I think all of us, recognize that there's something more going on in the pasuk. So first the Ramban quotes Rashi, and then he says, Aval, ha-medrash b'Gemara eino kain. There's a drasha in the Gemara that's different. Ela hizhir ha-katuv b'nichbadim ba'am, right? There's a pasuk that says, Elohim lo tikalel v'nasi ba'amecha lo ta'or. Right, that's in Mishpatim, I believe. So says the Ramban, that pasuk is the highest people. You know, you can't curse the prime minister. You can't curse the Supreme Court justice. You can't curse the president. Chazar v'hizhir ba'umlalim. Here it's a different approach. Now the Torah is telling us not only can't you curse the most important people in society, but he says Lo tikalel chayresh means you can't curse the least important people in society, the people who can't even hear you. Umehem yilmedu binyanav el kol shar ha'am. Well, if I can't curse the most important people and I can't curse the least important people, I can't curse anybody. Ki min harosh va'ad hasof hakol bichlal ha'azhara. Right? If you say the most important people, least important people, so you've covered everyone. Umilat ba'amecha nidrash ba'usei ma'aseh amcha. This prohibition of cursing a deaf person is only covering those who keep the Torah, not people who don't. Lahotzi harishayim. He says there's no prohibition on cursing rishayim. Okay, that's just the Gemara. But now says the Ramban valderech hapshat. But if you ask me what the real pshat in the pasuk is, hizkir hacheresh biklala. Right, it mentioned the prohibition of cursing a deaf person. Ki afal pi shelo yishma v'lo yitkatzef biklaluto. Even though, what's the downside? He's not going to hear the curse. He's deaf. He's not going to get angry at you. Hizhira HaTorah alav. The Torah says, even such a person you can't curse. And obviously, anybody who hears you curse a deaf person should get furious, should be angry at you. Okay, so that's why it doesn't literally mean a deaf person. It means the person who you would think would not be offended by your cursing because he's unaware of it. You can't even do it to him. V'od, ki yazhir b'hoveh. The Torah is telling you the most likely case. Sha'adam mikalel acheresh, and then he includes the second part of the pasuk. Umachshil ha'iver shelo yira mehem ki lo yedu v'lo yavinu. Right? If I put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, he's not going to know who did it. He can't see. If I curse a deaf person, he doesn't know who did it. He can't hear. So says the Torah, even in those circumstances, you can't do it. Al kain, therefore the Torah, the pasuk ends with v'yareisa me'elokecha. Shehu ro'eh hanistarot. Here the Ramban might be hinting at a major issue that comes up in this pasuk, right? In halacha, lifnei iver lo titein michshol is understood to be an iver badavar. Doesn't literally mean a blind person. It means a person who won't know any better, right? You can't give bad advice to a person who doesn't know any better because he is considered to be a suma b'davar. As asked the Minchas Chinuch, a very famous question, but what about pshuto shel mikra? It sounds like if you can't give bad advice, if that's the Isser of V'lifnei Iver lo titein michshol, so if I put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, that's not the Isser. What happened to the general rule we have? That Ein Mikra Yotzei Midei Pshuto. So here is the Ramban's point. The end of the pasuk, there are 3 clauses. Lo tikalel cheresh, v'lifnei iver lo titein michshol, and then sort of the unrelated. V'yareitam elokecha ani Hashem. Says the Ramban, that's the point. When the Torah says v'yareitam elokecha ani Hashem, it means it's the kind of aveira that human beings won't be able to identify. When I give bad advice, no one knows I did it on purpose. I can always say, I thought Tesla was going to be a great investment. I can always say I meant it well. Says the Torah, v'yareitam elokecha ani Hashem. No, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. So the same thing with lo tikalel cheresh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ro'eh nistaros. And we'll just finish. V'hosif lav acher b'moshlim. And then the Torah adds in Mishpatim another prohibition to curse rulers. Ha-nasi v'hadayan, right? The president, the Supreme Court members. And the Ramban just a common sense psychological insight. He says, Ba'avur, shederech ha'anashim likal aleim b'chadrei mishkavam, kasher b'hishavto yetze resha. Generally, people do this at home when the other people can't hear, when they are ki'ilu chershim. Upi kililat ha-nasi v'hadayan takalot rabot. And it's very, very bad to say something negative about the prime minister. It's very, very bad to say something negative about the head of the Supreme Court. Ki hamon ha'am b'sichlutam, the general population, who may not be that smart, who may not be that up on politics, yisnu otam v'yit'oru lakum alehem. Right? It's very easy to get people to turn against the government. The Ramban says the Torah doesn't want that to happen. Vehem b'mishpatam ya'amid aretz. Maybe he's not the best prime minister in the world. Maybe she's not the best Supreme Court justice in the world. But they're upholding the law. And the world is working because of them. And says the Ramban, you need to be careful of that. Okay, that's the Ramban on the pasuk of Lo tikalel cheresh. Very interesting ideas. Let's move on to the next really, really important pasuk in the Torah, in the Parsha, pasuk Yud Zayin of that first parak. Says the Torah, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. Literally, you can't hate the other in your heart. Hocheach tochech et amitecha v'lo tisa alav chet. You should rebuke him and not carry the sin. And the fundamental question in the pasuk is it connected? Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. Rather, hocheach tochech et amitecha. Or are they separate clauses? So says the Ramban, Lo tisnat achicha bilvavecha. I'm skipping the beginning, and he says, V'hanachon be'enai. What I think the pshat is, Ki hocheach tochiach. Rather, you should rebuke them. Kimo v'hocheach et Avraham et Avimelech. It means to rebuke. V'yomar hakatuv, Al tisnat achicha bilvavecha, ba'asoto lecha shelo kirtzonecha. It's counterintuitive. You would never think that this is the pshat. But says the Ramban, you're not allowed to hate them in your heart. Aval tochichenu. You have to tell him, right? I don't like the fact, you really hurt me when you said that. When you didn't give me shlishi on Shabbos, it really bothered me. I wanted to get you have to say it to the other person. Madua kacha asita imadi. Right? Oftentimes people say to themselves, if I say something, it's going to make it worse. Okay, I'm writing this guy off. I'm never inviting him over for a Shabbos meal. I'll nod at him, but he's not a person I want to have any relationship with. Says Ramban, that's wrong. It's wrong for 2 reasons. First, if he really did something wrong to you, you should tell him. Now, often what's going to happen, at least in my experience, is you're going to realize it's you, it's not him. Right? When you have to say to the gabbai, I was really hurt when you didn't give me maftir this Shabbos, you realize it's you. Why did he have to give it to you? Did you tell him you needed it? Was it your father's yard side? It's you. So oftentimes you're going to realize there's no reason for me to give him tochacha because it will just reveal what a small person I am. But let's say it is true. Let's say something happened and it really bothers you. So what chance do you have of repairing the relationship? If not, lo tisnat achicha b'levavecha. Rather, I need to get it out. When I carry around hatred in my heart, it's only going to get worse. And I'm going to assume the worst about this person for the rest of my life. Says the Ramban, that's wrong. The Torah means literally, let it out. Sit down with the person, write him an email, explain why it bothered you so much, and give him a chance. If he really did something wrong, give him a chance to do tshuva. Aval tochichenu, madua kacha asita imadi, v'lo tisa alav chet l'chasot sinato bilibcha, v'lo tagid lo. Right? The pasuk says at the end, v'lo tisa alav chet. What would the sin be? Says the Ramban, the sin would be not telling him. If you don't tell him, how's he going to make it better? Ki bahochichacha oto yitnatzelecha. It's likely that he'll apologize. I didn't mean that. I didn't know it would hurt you. I'm so sorry. I meant it as a joke. O yashuv yitvadel cheto v'titchaper lo. Or he'll really apologize. V'acharei kein yazhir shalo tinkom mimenu v'lo titor bilvavcha masha asalecha. Says the Ramban, when the Torah continues, the next pasuk, lo tikom v'lo titor et b'nei amecha, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Hashem. It's not unrelated to the previous pasuk. It's the same flow. Ki yitachen shalo yisnoto aval yizkar achet b'libo. It's possible, okay, I don't hate the person, but I know he did this wrong thing to me. Ulufikach yazhireno shi'i mache pesha achi v'chatato milibo. Says the Ramban, the Torah wants you to completely erase this. It's as if it never happened. V'acharei kein yitzaveh shi'ahav lo kamohu. And then the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is possible, right? Once you don't hate people, once you've made up with them, once you're open with them and say, well, what happened was painful to me, and the person says, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it that way, then you can be zocha to v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Okay, because we're going to run out of time. Very last one. Pasuk Yutes. Says the Torah, it's not the first time the word appears. Eschu kosai tishmoru behem tchalo tabir kilaim sadchalo tizra kilaim uvegech kilaim shatnez lo yalech alecha. What's etchu kotai tishmoru? So Rashi there says chukim elu gzerot melech she'em tam ledavar. I'm not sure Rashi really means it. There are other Rashis on this, but Rashi seems to say a chok is there's no reason for it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided on his own. There's no rational reason for the mitzvah. Says the Ramban, no way. Ve'ein hakavana bahem shetihiyeh gzeirat melech malchei amlachim b'shum makom b'lo ta'am. Can't be that God gzeiros are without reason. Ki kalim rat alokat tzrufa. Everything God says has a reason, and it's purifying. Rak hachukim heim gzeirat hamelech asher yachok b'malchuto b'li shigaleto al tam la'am. No, a chok, says the Ramban, has as much reason as a mishpat. Just HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided not to reveal the reason. Ve'ein ha'am nehenim bahem. And so the people don't get that joy that you would get out of a mishpat. When I give tzedakah, I understand it, and I feel good about doing it. When I do kibbud av va'em, I understand the reason I feel good about doing it. When I don't wear shatnez, what am I doing? Says the Ramban, okay, that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a reason for shatnez. Maybe we have second thoughts about keeping chukim because we don't really understand them. But that doesn't change the fact, says the Ramban, that there is a reason and there is a rationale for every single chok. Aval kulam b'ta'am nachon v'toelet shlema. Nevertheless, says the Ramban, each of the chukim are for a particular reason and for a particular purpose. And the Ramban goes on to explain the reason for kilayim, right? Not necessarily the reason for all chukim, but the Ramban wants you to believe, similar to the Rambam, or not exactly like the Rambam, that there is value to chukim. It's Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal's yard site tomorrow, or today if you're watching it on Rosh Chodesh, and he often said, the reason for every mitzvah is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us to do so. Once you accept that as the premise, then you can look for Tamei HaMitzvos. Then you can find meaning in mitzvos, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to find meaning in mitzvos. But if, God forbid, you're looking to find meaning, because otherwise you're not going to do it, no, that's not the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu works. when the pasuk says Tuv Tam Vadas Lamdeni, and the legend has it that Rav Lichson used to write that pasuk on his notebooks in college. Tuv Tam Vadas Lamdeni, teach me the secrets of your Torah. Why? Ki b'mitzvotecha ha'amanti. I'm doing it anyway. I believe anyway in you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I believe in your mitzvos. So therefore, make it more meaningful to me and help me to understand the reasons behind them. Okay, we did 4 mitzvos today. The first, the grandfather of all Rambans on the Torah, is Kedoshim Tihiyu, Naval BeReshut HaTorah. We talked about the fact that the Ramban sees no loopholes in the Torah. There's a purpose. There are specific assays. There are specific los assays. But the purpose is the overwhelming guide to what we want to do. Lo tikalel chayresh v'lifei v'lo titein b'chshol. The Ramban's understanding of pshuto shel mikra. What is a chayresh? What is an iver? Why can't we do that? Lo tisnat achicha bilvavacha. Literally, if you hate him, tell him so, because good things will come of that. And et chukotai tishmoru, that chukim have reasons. Everything in the Torah has a reason, but there's a reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't share it with us. That's a much bigger philosophic point for another time. We're out of time today. Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov, and see you next week, God willing.